Welcome to the Juice Consumer Direct Podcast. I'm Nate Clegg here with Jake Thorpe, Carson Poppinger, and our special guest, Brian Bailey. So welcome, Brian, to the podcast. We're happy to have you.
It's good to be here.
Carson, do you want to do a little bit of his bio?
Yeah, so I've known Brian for probably like at least 10 years, I think.
Yeah.
We started working with your company in 2012 and providing live transfers and things back to Low VA back in the day. And so that's been 13 years ago.
I started on that project, Carson.
That's right. Jacob's first project he worked on with
Slinging
us.
transfers.
Wow.
Yeah, he was on the phones making it happen. And Brian's always kind of stood out as someone that I know that like runs the sales operation over there as sales leader. As a mortgage loan officer, like when we probably first started working together, I was asking Brian, I'm like, well, what's your top month? And he said 74 loans, 17 million personally that he put up for that operation. And then their best month ever as a team was 653 loans for their team, 140 million. Best year ever was 4,500 loans for over $1 billion. And that was a record year that you guys.
That was something, man. I wish we could go back to that for sure. That was special.
And I think it's so awesome because those numbers are so impressive, and it kind of shows and highlights what we want to talk about today, which is the differences between a lot of traditional mortgage lending operations and consumer direct lending operations. So we're going to kind of talk about that today on the show with Brian. So glad to have you here, Brian.
It's great to be here.
So Brian, tell us a little bit about your start. How'd you get into the game?
Oh man, this is a fun story. Like a lot of people in Utah, I was knocking doors, selling alarms, or Dish Network. I sold a lot of different products, and I'd gone out for my 6th year, and I just gotten engaged in May and was going out to Baltimore, Maryland to sell for my 6th summer. And something just clicked, and it's like I'm giving up the best time of year to be in Utah, which is the summer. Ever since I served a mission, and when I got home from my mission, I got right into it. And so I was just doing that every single summer. Then you come back and kind of live it up, or people say, you live it up. It's not the best, but you definitely learn some things. Anyway, I had just gotten worn down on that lifestyle, and I was out there for 2 weeks, and I was like, I got to make a shift. The owner of Low VA Rates, Eric Candle, he had posted something, a job opportunity. They were looking for a scrubber. Kind of, I imagine you guys have something similar on your floor. People are calling in, you got to scrub up the lead and qualify it, and then you pass it on to a licensed loan officer. So I started doing that, and I was working like 7 to 4. I think I was making like $9 an hour, and I was at home in the summer, and it was just like the greatest job ever. Like I loved it. And I was right outside of Eric's office, and he was like, hey, man, you're kind of good on the phone. Like, maybe we could have you, start selling some of these loans. And so I got licensed and just kind of took off from there. So that's how I got into it.
That's a pretty relatable story because a lot of people here do door-to-door sales, and they, as they're younger, kind of start off, and that's their sort of entrance into sales career. And then you've turned that into the next step and moved on and done really, really well. So
Yeah, that's actually, I did that too. For mine, I got married and then got poor really, really fast. And just like sheer desperation moved. Yeah, sheer desperation, went out and sold pest control in Arizona and the heat. But it went really well and did that for a couple years, and it just introduced me to the sales world and how good it can be. And it actually can be kind of fun in a way, right? If you have the right perspective.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of my first questions. When it comes down to culture and establishing culture within a sales organization, one, how do you identify the right people that are the right fit? And then once they're in there, like, what do you do culturally to keep them there and keep them motivated?
Yeah. Man, that is definitely tricky, but I think making sure that you have the right person in the right role, the right hat in the right seat kind of thing, is the number one thing. So when I'm hiring for a sales position, I want to know that they've got it, basically. Not that everybody's going to be an all-star, but they have some level of self-determination. Like, I have to make this happen. With loans, it's 100% commission. So you kind of weed people out pretty easily. And if you don't do that, they just end up being a drain on resources, your time, other people's time. They're like, oh, hey, let me just shadow you a little bit. Let me pick up. Like, you don't need any training other than picking up the phone. Like that is the quickest way to learn. Yeah, you want to make sure you know the terms and you're licensed and you're complying with the law. But really the fastest way for somebody to learn is to just get on the phone and mess it up and hear no and be like, oh, I should have done this differently. So you weed those people out pretty early, just making sure that they are self-starters and they want to make some money. For sure.
Kind of like what Nate hit on, where he got married and was all of a sudden really motivated to make money. And they've got to have that why. They have to have a why. And if they have it, then they can, they're going to get after it. If they don't, they're going to sort of struggle. And then, then attitudes and things like that can come into play. Well, I'm not making any sales, or I'm not getting the good leads, or they come up with every reason in the book why they're not closing deals. And so they've got to have that motivation, determination, and the why to succeed for sure.
I think that's something that's unique about the area that we live in too. We talk to a lot of our partners, and they have loan officers that are bouncing from one lender to another lender to another lender to another lender to another lender. And I think with a lot of the population that at least we hire for, we might be their first sales job, and so they don't necessarily come in, other than maybe door to door, they don't come in with the preconceived notions. They're a little bit more moldable, and that's been something that's been helpful, where they come in and we teach them principles that they can then apply and go and become a loan officer and work for a low VA, or go and work for one of our partners, or be an account executive somewhere, where they learn those principles, they're humble, they have a why, and then they work hard and take advantage of the opportunities that they have.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on like the difference between someone that's maybe experienced somewhere else, or they've got like, let's say 5 years or 10 years, and then you bring them on, versus
100% prefer inexperience. I was going to say, I've hired people from other mortgage companies in the past, and it's pretty much never worked out. They're never your all-stars. And the way that our business function, it's just so specific to our niche that having experience in the mortgage world at another company's pretty big stumbling block, because they think they've got, hey, no, I know how to, they've got their ways, and they're not very moldable or coachable. So inexperienced for sure.
That's something that a lot of our lenders that we've talked to, they come across that, like Jacob mentioned, they'll bounce from like one Orange County lender to another Orange County lender, and they'll lose someone for a few bucks more or something like that, or another half BIP or whatever it is.
Right.
And then they're bouncing around. And we've talked a lot about the, potentially helping sort of help some of our people transition from being like outbound agents into being like junior LOs. They could get licensed and sort of pick up, because they have that hunger, that desire, that motivation to learn and grow their career. They're looking for the next step, and I think that's definitely key, is having somebody that's teachable and coachable.
So when you do find someone who you feel like is the right person, or someone who you've identified that there's talent there, there's potential, what do you do with that person to help provide them opportunities to grow?
So usually we will just stick them next to a couple of the best loan officers for like 2 days. Let them listen. Hey, you're not pounding them with questions. Write down your questions. Come ask me the questions. You're just a fly on the wall. You're going to watch them, watch everything that they do. And then typically, like after they get licensed, we're assuming they've already been licensed. The actual on-the-job training is just, hey, you're shadowing this person, and then you're going to come in with me, ask me all your questions, and then we're going to put you on the phone. And that's like the quickest way for them to get money, because with it being 100% commission, and there's a little bit of a lag time between they have to study for the test, then they have to pass the test, then they have to apply for the licensing, all the background checks. They might be, not making any money for a while. We got to pay them a little bit just to have gas in the car, but we got to get them making money as soon as possible. So that's just throw them into the fire. That is the best way that I found. Just like with door to door, it's like, hey, we're selling pest control. You don't need to know anything about it other than it kills bugs. There's a door. Go sell somebody some pest control. That
it's all
I can try and
theoretical.
coach you all you want, but you're going to forget it anyway. Just get out there and fall on your face.
It's all theoretical until you start putting it into practice. Now, one of the big things that Carson alluded to in the mortgage industry is the difference between the average everyday mortgage officer that's like your cousin or your brother-in-law or whatever, versus a consumer direct business. And let's talk about that, the difference between, hey, I'm just going to go out there, I'm going to talk to real estate agents, versus, because you're talking about putting somebody on the phone. What does that mean exactly for a loan officer who's in that sort of business?
Yeah, it's a big difference. A lot of the loan officers that are working with agents. You know, they wear a shirt and tie, and they're just doing coffee meetings all the time, and there's a lot of schmoozing involved. And you know, we're not really we've tried that a little bit to kind of help with the cycles of the mortgage business, but it's never really caught on. And you know, our people really excel when the phone rings. Or when, you know, things have started to drop down, the market's downturned a little bit, then, you know, pounding our database and just combing through, texting, just getting really creative, because when you're in person, you can rely on, you know, your charisma a lot more than just your voice, you know, the way that you present yourself and kind of your aura and that sort of thing. But on the phone, that a lot of that goes away. So you've got to really hone in on what you're saying, how you're saying it, and you got to connect with people much quicker than you would have to in person. Or you can just repetitively reach out to an agent. Hey, let's go get something to eat real quick. And you just do that for 6 months, and then eventually they just start sending you deals, you know? Whereas on the phone, you've got like a second to make an impression on somebody to get them interested in whatever it is that you're selling that day.
Yeah, the traditional mortgage lending is all about relationships, and they're going to the closings and they're doing all those things. And like their top month, they may close, you know, 10 loans, and that's a great month. And that's a great month, and they're doing well. And they, you know, I know that there's differences in comp structures and things like that. They're not doing all the marketing that you guys are doing.
Right.
They're not getting inbound opportunities coming in. They're having to actually pound the pavement to get those. But yeah, they might close 10 deals a month, but as I mentioned in the beginning, like, you know, you close 75 loans in a month. Like that's a big difference in total volume. And, you know, it's the whole operation, it's the marketing strategy, it's, you know, how you're talking to them on the phone. And, you know, I think one thing that you kind of alluded to too is the questions you're asking and finding out the consumer's pain points and what they're looking to accomplish. You know, we try to do that on our calls, and then hand it over to the loan officer so that they're prepared to know, like, okay, they're looking to save money so that they can, you know, put a solar on the roof and go green or something like that. Right. You know, so what kind of thoughts do you have on probing questions and things like that?
Well, I think that is probably the most important thing. Like once you kind of make that initial connection, hey, thanks for calling in, love to help you out, and understand you're trying to save some money. What are you saving money for? You know, my son, he just went to college, we're helping pay for books, or hey, we're trying to add a pool, or you know, whatever we're having a surgery, unfortunately, you know, we got medical bills. You've got to really nail that down. And a lot of times people will just say, hey man, I just want the lowest rate, and that's just kind of a smoke screen, and you gotta, you know, come back in a couple minutes and nail it down. Because if you don't really know that, you can still close deals, but they're going to be a lot weaker. Your cancellation rate's going to be much higher, and it's not going to be as good of an experience. And even though a lot of the relationship-based business that originators will have with real estate agents is totally relationship, it's kind of indirect. You know, like the customer is the person buying the house, but they're really just going with the agent, and the agent's sending you the loan, and the customer doesn't even really know what's going on. They just know I'm buying this house and I have to get a loan. Whereas when we're dealing with clients, they're calling in, we've got to get to know them, and we build a relationship directly with the client, you know? And so even though, you know, we might do a loan with them over the phone and we've never met them, they're calling us every 6 months or 18 months when they see something on the news about, hey, I'm going to reach out to my guy, Brian. And so we've built that relationship direct with the client, whereas, you know, otherwise it's just kind of through the agent. And but you have to figure out their why and what they've got going on, and why out of all the calls that people get, like on a daily basis, or junk mail that they get, like what made you pick up the phone today? Like we've called hundreds of thousands of people today, and you picked up. Why did you pick up? There's a reason to talk to a telemarketer, or to look at a piece of mail and actually call the number. Like when was the last time you called the number off of a piece of mail?
Yeah, 100%. And when we used to sell, we sold a lot of different things over the phone. Not mortgages, but from the closing standpoint. But we've sold, tax resolution with tax resolution companies we've worked with. We've sold, purple mattresses, little giant ladders, lots of things. And we had a strategy that we've talked about before on this show, or on our podcast, called the rock and the gem. That was like what we called it anyway. The rock was like, you imagine like a pond, and you throw like a stone in the pond, and there's all these ripples that come from that. The rock is like the why did you respond, why now, why, like what's, and you hit on that, and I love that, because that's what we call the rock. And then the gem is like that underlying, like they say, yeah, I just want the lowest rate. But the gem is like the surgery, or it's my kids are in college and I don't have any funds to pay for that. And I want them to get a good education so they can do better than I.
You got to polish the stone.
You got to polish the stone. Yeah, you got to polish the stone.
And you can only do that by asking questions. And so it's like somebody says, hey, my son's going to college. Awesome. What college is he going to? Oh, he's going to Utah State. Oh, that's awesome. Go Aggies. Did you go to school? And we're going down this old memory lane, and he's telling me about his kid and what he's studying in college. And man, that's going to be pretty exciting. Like, how's that going to feel helping your son pay for his books? And then it's not at all about the mortgage anymore. It has like nothing to do with it. He's tied to that emotion, that feeling. And when the underwriter has all this nonsense that he needs him to comply with, instead of him, hey, I just need the lowest rate, those people are going to cancel. They'll be like, hey, I'm out of here. But when you tie it to the son or the surgery or the new paint for the house, whatever it is, they feel that emotion and they're like, I'm going through with this. I'm making it happen. So you have a much stronger client.
I also think just the amount of time that they then dedicate to you as a person.
Totally.
Like anytime you're talking to somebody, you're automatically developing a relationship.
Yeah.
So most of our relationships with the average person we meet in a day is going to be really, really shallow. But if you take that time to deepen that relationship, then you're invested into that moment, that person, that idea. So they're more likely to transact with you, you know?
Totally.
So,
yeah, one of the best pieces of sales advice I got, on at least as it relates to phone sales, is the longer you can speak with a person, the more likely they are to transact with you. In other words, like, spend time not even talking about the product, but just building rapport and establishing a relationship.
Buy time.
And then when it comes to that, it's very simple. You've already got the trust and you've already got this relationship. And that's just ask questions, get to know the person.
You can totally tell sometimes even on the phone when somebody is like, there's different kinds of people, but some people are like, hey, I'm down to business and I'm good to be friends with you and everything, but I got to go. Like, we got to get this done. But then you hear something in the background and you bring, oh, is that your kid? Yeah, okay. How many kids do you have? And they're like, dang it, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it. And then they start opening themselves a little bit.
Breaking some walls.
It totally changes everything. And that you're not going to get that 100% of the time, but definitely the more that you do, the more solid your sales will be.
When you've done this long enough, you can think of probably certain situations and people that you've dealt with and calls you've listened to that you've identified like, hey, this is why this didn't work. But one that came to mind for me was we had a sales agent who was selling Little Giant ladders, and he was always struggling to like get his numbers to close at the right rates and everything as everybody else. And I'm listening to this call, and like the customer, of course, a lot of times in consumer direct, what's the rate? What's the rate? What's the price? Give me the price. They want to know the price, and they're pressuring the sales guy for the price. And of course, he just spits out the price in the sort of the beginning of the call, right? And then the rest of he actually sold this one, but they canceled.
Right.
And the reason that they canceled is because like he rolled the price, and I'm like, never roll the price until you know the rock and the gem, you know why and all that. But he rolls the price, and then he spends the next 30 minutes of the call just trying to justify the price. Like, and so and then at the end, the guy, you could hear the customer was like, this isn't the best deal. I'm going to do it, but I feel like you're not giving me the best deal. Because he gave him the best price in the beginning of the call. And then at the end of the call, he still didn't know, why did the guy even want the ladder to begin with? What was he working on? What kind of projects? What is he? How tall? How big is his house? Does he want to do windows?
And that was a lead that someone else would have closed.
Yeah,
and it's frustrating to be on a team with people like that, because they just cannibalize the opportunity. We talk about that with our teams constantly. It's don't be the one that's taking money from somebody else because you're not doing your part.
I was thinking about, you mentioned like you'll get on the phone as quickly as possible. In those situations, you end up with like some people, you end up with a higher, maybe not interested disposition or whatever. And we've actually like queued those leads up specifically for the top dogs to go after.
Right.
And they have like the highest contact rate, the highest close rate.
Yeah.
Have you ever done anything with that?
Oh, for sure. And you just match their energy. You're mirroring them. Like, hey, what can you do for me? Oh, sounds like you're in a hurry. Looks like we need to try and save you money as quickly as possible. Tell me a little bit about your situation. No fluff. We'll just get right down to business. And then they start giving you some information, because you have to have some information to give them some kind of quote or sell them anything. And then you just throw a little dart in there to kind of open them up a little bit. And it's just a little bit different process, but it's the same process, but you just got to tackle it a little bit different.
Yeah, this was something that, so when I was going to school, I was a TA for our sales management program. And one of the things that they talked about was the different personas that you can face on the phone. And I'm trying to remember all of them because it's been a second. It's like a lamb, a tiger, a bull, and an owl. So owl's like analytical. Yeah. Lamb is more docile and maybe more passive. Tiger's very expressive and might want to connect a little bit more. And bulls, did I get all of them? Owl, yeah. And bulls are the drivers. They're the ones that you're talking about. I'm the one that's in control of this call. And each of those personas has a different way that you have to. Some of them will want connection and want to build trust before you ever get to the product or the price. The bull just wants to get straight to it. Like, I'm in control of this call. And as long as I feel like I'm in control of this call, I'll give you what you need.
Totally.
And that's something that I've found to be really helpful, even with my team. So I run our client service team. When we have personas or people that we're dealing with, like, let's think about what type of person this is. What do we know about them? What do we know about how they like to be interacted with? The information that they need to feel good. And how can we provide that for them? And how can we adapt our communication strategy? And it takes a bit of a sixth sense to be able to understand that.
It's that ed factor,
training it's not always easy because some people understand it super intuitively, and others
they don't pick up on it in the real world. It's just right over their head.
But then again, I've met people on the phones who are just killers on the phone. And then you meet them face to face, and they have no concept of like how to communicate.
They're a savant on the phone.
It's a bit of a superpower, I guess. But that's been something that's been helpful for me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been doing sales since forever. In one form or another, I've told these guys my first sales job was selling donuts door to door at 10, and I ate most of the profits, but it was still a cool experience. But when you get used to that, when you meet a lot of people and you just watch them, and I think part of that is kind of like that people watching mentality of like, you just want to understand a person and their process. You can just eventually, like you said, just intuit it and you naturally mirror what they're doing to match the conversation to make sure that it goes well. I had a question. Let's say we have somebody who's in mortgage and they're doing the traditional thing, but they're trying to transition more to a direct-to-consumer type model. What advice would you have for them? How do they build up that funnel? How do they build their process to kind of create that sort of business versus the traditional mortgage business?
Man, you got to have some deep pockets, I would say. Or you've got to make sure your conversions are really good. Because if you don't have deep pockets, your conversion's going to be, direct to consumer can be quite expensive. So usually having a big team, to make sure you can do a lot of volume. It's all about volume. So like a single person or a couple people trying to do that might be pretty tough. There might be other ways to do it, but that's definitely not something that I would recommend to somebody unless, like I said, they've got deep pockets.
Okay, so get some money together. Or let's say they do have some money, and let's say it's a team of 5 to 10, and they're like making that move.
I've seen some of these brick and mortar, like this is maybe something that we want to talk about, but a lot of these brick and mortar stores, there's some things coming down with like the FCC where brick and mortar stores, different branches under the same parent company have to follow the exact same compliance processes. And that's something that a lot of these brick and mortar stores are struggling with.
They all have their own processes.
They have their own processes. So I'm like a branch manager, and like my book of business is a spreadsheet or notes on my phone.
Right.
But the parent company now needs to know all of the interactions that you've had with the customers, and they need things to be recorded, and they need everything to be centralized and standardized for compliance purposes. And getting these brick and mortar shops to follow the exact same process across the country,
it's a whole headache.
It's a whole headache, and it's been interesting for me to be kind of on the other side of that and watch as I've been watching these companies try to adopt these strategies, but
it's still a disadvantage for sure.
Yeah. You've got these guys that have 20 years of experience, and they've got their way of doing things, and getting them to do something different is not easy.
Consolidating all those different silos up under one marketing operation that's compliant and consistent and predictable and all that is.
That's not just mortgage either. That's home services. That's any financial service, insurance, any store that you go into and there's a brick and mortar, like a storefront, but it's owned by a parent company. The compliance there is going to get a little bit more complicated. Although there are rumors that there may be a stay on some of the one-to-one TCPA rulings.
Yeah. With the change in administration.
Yeah, we'll see though.
We'll see.
I mean, we were talking about the differences between, traditional lending operations and consumer direct. And this is a big one, like the consolidation and the, processes and policies and things. What about on the marketing side? What kind of things are you doing, or have you been involved in receive work how do you collaborate with marketing to make sure that you're on the same page with the sales group, because marketing and sales is like always a little bit.
Yeah, I think maybe we could have potentially done this better, but I don't know, because our results were great. But we would get, calls from, live transfers or direct mail call or some internet campaign, click the dial. Like we had sales just needs the phone to ring. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. Marketing is trying to make the phone ring. So however they can do that, that's what matters. And some guys kind of have, well, I need to know exactly where it came from. What piece of advertising did they see? What did the mailer look like? What was the ad that they clicked on? What did the person from the live transfer, how did they get them and get in touch with them? It's like, dude, this is just, they're on the phone. Just talk to them, sell them something. So a lot of guys would kind of push back against that. But I mean, that was kind of, as a sales manager, I was kind of more on marketing side. And it's like, look, dude, the phone's ringing. If you'd rather the phone not ring, then we can make some adjustments. But
analysis paralysis comes to
Totally.
mind, where you're like, I want to know everything about this before I can have a conversation, and you're not going to. And so just dive into it and, probe, find out, like we talked about earlier. And so that was one of the things that we actually had an opportunity. We get, mortgage groups will approach us all the time, and hey, even individuals, I work by myself, send me some calls, send me some leads. What can you give me in Idaho or whatever, and I'm like, well, we can't really.
You're like, we're out. Calls when you have 50 of you all together. Yeah.
And some of the groups we talked to had like 100 or 200, individual siloed agents that, it's a pretty big team, right? Mm-hmm. But I had to explain to some of our team, I'm like, but if we send them an inbound transfer, they're not going to know how to do everything that you talked about in order to close that customer. They're going to treat it like, well, I'm used to getting referrals from my friends and family that have like a 80 or 90% close rate, and how do you prevent yourself from not getting a 5% close rate when you're looking for like a 10% close rate, right? Yeah. And that's sort of like, it's a different game a little bit. So
very different.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I wish everyone maybe had that approach. I know where we sit, we're trying to make the phone ring for our partners, but we're also trying to balance like quality and quantity.
Totally.
Because we're a pay for performance company. So they pay us per billable lead or qualified sales opportunity. So it has to meet a certain threshold or a certain duration for that lead to be billable. And it feels like lately half of my job is helping the sales teams that we work with know how to close a deal. Yeah. Like I'll pick up the phone, or I'll hear them pick up the phone. I'll listen to call recordings, and it's, hey, how can I help you? Or why did you want to refinance today?
Right.
Like they're not even taking the time to give them like a white glove.
Right.
Hey, like aligning. My goal today is to help you get in a better financial situation. So let's chat. Let me ask you a couple questions. Yeah. Like there's so many small things that you can do.
Well, it's interesting hearing Brian's take where he's like, don't get hung up on that. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, exactly.
In our job and what we're doing and what we always tell our clients, we are trying to understand where the leads are coming from so that we can craft the script and maybe bridge that gap.
On the front end.
Yeah.
But when the phone rings, they still need to close the deal regardless.
Yeah.
Exactly. But they've got to have that trust in our process and what we're doing.
Yeah. We kind of take that information and turn it into our process, which in turn should help the salespeople not have to worry about that at all.
Right.
So,
and with technology as it is now, a lot of times there's a screen pop that says exactly what lead source and how many times they've been interacted with, and notes from our agent that we took, and sometimes maybe too much information where there might be even some prejudging that happens before they get that.
You see that
a certain source I don't like, or a certain type of lead. Oh, it's a rate term lead. I'm not even going to spend any time on this.
We've talked to them 3 times and they haven't closed. Next, instead of maybe taking that opportunity. Maybe they got a new salesperson that was just learning and fumbled it. They fumbled the bag.
Got to rehabilitate those agents a little bit.
But. I met with a partner last week, and historically they've just taken inbound calls. And they'd never taken like transfers. They'd never taken warm transfers, which are very different. An inbound call, just for anyone who's listening, someone picked up the phone and they decided to engage with your brand, and there's intent right there.
Direct mail.
There might not be benefit. There might not be a benefit for that person, but there's definitely intent because they picked up the phone and called. They might be curious. They might want to talk to customer service. That it might be a bunch of different things.
Facebook click. Maybe they see an ad on Facebook
Could
and
be.
click it.
Could be. And then a warm transfer is there's been a scrubber or a fronter that's called this lead and interrupted their day, but has vetted some sort of interest and qualification to transfer. So you know that there's a benefit, but there might not be the inherent interest that there is with an inbound call. And the difference between those two calls and the beginning of that call, you talked about how the beginning of that call is the most important part, like how you build that trust right away. It's kind of crazy to hear the way that some of our partners, and not just our partners, just people in general, handle these calls. Like, no one's perfect, and our goal is to try to help them, enable them to make as many sales as possible. But breaking it down to the basics, it's exactly what you're talking about. It's establishing a relationship, building trust, aligning your goals with theirs, and then just going.
It's like, have you ever been on a phone call? Like some of these agents that are just, hi, how can I help you? Like, have you ever called FedEx or AT&T and the person's just a dead fish? Like, you're not going to make any sales. You got to adjust.
Yeah.
Well, I was listening to an agent do a call actually not too long, a couple days ago as well. And he was taking an inbound call just like you described. And I watched the conversation listened to the conversation go from, hey, this product would qualify for you. And then he talked the person out of actually transacting. I was like, what are you doing on that call? So some people just, they got to get out of their own way and figure out how to close it. And
say just enough and not too much.
Yeah, totally.
Something that we're seeing a lot, or we're hearing a lot about right now in the industries we work in, is the impact of AI on sales, and how a lot of companies are trying to digitize basically their sales force and move as much of the refinance process to be online. Right. No employee involvement other than documents and things like that. What's your take on that? I know I have an opinion on it.
It sounds great until you deal with an AI chatbot and you're just like, this is completely useless. Agent, can I speak with an agent, please? Because there are definitely cookie cutter scenarios where you could use an AI chatbot, but so many of the scenarios that people are asking about, the questions that they're bringing up, they're just not, right now, the technology that I've seen, it's just not there. And I don't know how this works as far as compliance goes. And I'm sure, whatever branch that they're calling into, they have a licensed individual. But how do you require a license for the loan originator, and then there's actually no communication whatsoever with the consumer? I don't know how that's going to
there are some limitations
change,
in lending with AI, I believe, already.
Yeah, and I think if I'm going to be signing a check for as large a sum of money as some of these might be, I want to talk to someone. And I want to make sure that my needs are met and they're understood. And I don't know why I would trust an AI more than I would trust.
I definitely wouldn't.
Personally. Person. Yeah, I want to talk to somebody. This happens to me regularly, even with customer service. I see it with customer service. I go online and I'm trying to solve a problem.
Yeah.
Hey, can I talk to an agent? Yeah. Can I talk to an agent? Can I talk to an agent?
I
just want to talk to somebody.
Not to pick on Delta, but they have that, they have the chatbot, AI chatbot.
You got status. You got status.
Wow. But you're chatting with it, and then you're just representative agent, and then they're like, before I get you to an agent, I need it, and I'm like,
and they ask you all this stuff about your problem, as if they're going to give that to the actual agent, and they're not going to ask you all the same questions again.
Yeah, they do.
It's a layer to just get. It's I'm definitely going to get angry.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be fun to talk to for sure.
Can they make it through the gauntlet?
I think the limitations of AI are now, like you said, the technology's not there to handle those more robust conversations. If it's like a decision tree where it's going to get me to the right person, sure.
Yeah, very transactional, very quick.
Super high level sort of filter questions, sure. But when it comes to writing a big check or insuring your car or something like that, you probably want to talk to somebody. Make sure you got it all figured out and it's the right thing for you.
Yeah, maybe if there's some, I'm sure there's some company that's working on this right now, but if they can go through all of my texts and all of my emails over the last 13 years and come up with me, what I'm actually going to say, then that might be useful,
There's a while before
Yeah, it's gonna be a minute.
It'll be,
for sure.
it'll be a minute.
Yeah.
Even then, just the dynamic that, that somebody has and the pivoting they can do is still a little ways out.
I think that just a good personal touch on a sell is it's great.
Priceless.
Yeah, it's priceless.
Yeah.
Like it's
Well, it can generate more repeat business too.
For sure.
yeah, it definitely. It's more like you said, the emotion.
Yeah.
You're missing the emotion piece.
Totally.
That connection.
It's like, have you ever used Grok or ChatGPT and like tell me a joke or something, and they're not that great, Whereas a joke isn't always what you say, because like Dave Chappelle can tell a joke, and I can tell the exact same joke, but people aren't going to laugh because the way that it's delivered, the energy in the room, they're kind of playing off of that. Whereas a chatbot's just, I don't know, it's just ones and zeros. It doesn't have it for me.
Yeah, I agree.
So true. Question I had, right now, obviously the mortgage rate market is, getting back to highs again that we saw 10 years, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. What's your outlook for 2025, and what do you think you're going to do to like prepare for, adjusting to this rate market? I know you guys have done a lot already to adjust to, keeping the doors open and keeping things going. What do you foresee?
I wouldn't say it's too rosy. I mean, I wouldn't expect, perhaps the federal funds lending rate will come down, but I don't know how that impacts the bond market for mortgages specifically. So if the bond market's not responding well, then interest rates for mortgages, they're not really going to move much. So I'm not doomsday. I assume it's going to stay pretty close to where it is. Maybe we'll see a little movement, but I don't think it's going to drop anything.
What kind of rate would you like to see before you'd feel like, okay, we can get back to work? And
I'd say if we got something into the low fives, maybe right at 5, or even if we had a good product, because something that we did early on, like in 2010 to probably 2015, was the hybrid. And as long as we have something to sell that's a couple points below the par rate that people are getting, even if it's a hybrid adjustable, we could sell that all day. I mean, I think it was 2013 where like 97% of the loans that we closed were hybrid ARMs.
I remember that, yeah.
So it's not necessarily, rate matters, but if we could have that product to sell, then, we could sell that all day, no problem.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's on the forecast.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question that Jake asked you earlier, and you already answered, but we're going to do it here on the podcast.
Okay.
Tell us about your hat.
Hat, this is a very special hat. It's from Bandon Trails up at Bandon Dunes Golf Resort in Bandon, Oregon. My friends and I joke. We go every year in December. There's 8 to 12 of us. Sometimes it gets up to 16. But we joke about it. It's kind of like a grown man's summer camp, because you're just there with your dudes. There's no wife. There are a few wives that come, which is crazy, at least in my opinion, that you would bring your wife up to that. But it's just like a summer camp. And this last year, I was wearing this hat into one of the restaurants, and he's like, "Hey, where'd you get that hat?" I was like, "Oh, I got it at Bandon Trails." He's like, "Oh, I'm like, "No, man, this was like a 2022 hat." It's like a badge of honor. Like, you had to be at the camp during that year, because once it's gone, it's gone. So
that's awesome.
It's Bandon Trails.
That's
hat.
on my
right?
that's on my list. I've talked to Carson about it.
Yeah.
That's on my
Gotta make it happen.
my golf bucket list for sure.
I had another friend that he and his dad went this last year, and they had a great time. And was the weather good in December?
It was the best it's ever been. It was like mid-50s, sunny every single day.
It's awesome. They have like a gauntlet they'll do where it starts. You basically 24
like in
out.
June.
Yeah, in June.
The longest
It's like,
day of the year.
I think it's the solstice.
It's the longest day of the year.
Yeah, and you play. I think it's
as
4
much
or
as you
5,
can play.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you try to finish all of the courses in 24 hours.
Yeah.
So you end up playing 90 holes of golf or something like that. 17, 90 holes of golf. Yeah, that'd be a lot. My back would be feeling it.
Stretch it out pretty good ahead of time.
Loose.
Yeah.
Last March, we went to Dallas and we played PGA Frisco. That was pretty fun.
Is that the one that they have like that kind of?
It's new PGA
It's like
headquarters.
a dome thing. It's like it's not Top Golf, but it's kind of like a Top
Par
Golf
3.
party vibe.
Yeah, par 3 course.
Night course.
Yeah, night course. Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
They have like
night
drink
golf.
carts out there. They
Yeah.
have like
Yeah,
was
it's
really,
that
really
place.
fun.
Looks like it.
it was a little. The turf was a little weird hitting off of. It seemed like I was always afraid I was going to like tear up the turf with my wedges, because you're just using wedges the whole time. And putters.
Yeah, it's pretty
great.
fun though.
But it was fun.
Really
we had a
fun.
good time. We took a client of ours.
Yeah, we have a lot of clients out there, so it's like a fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dallas is kind of mortgage heavy, so.
Is it?
Yeah,
I didn't
for
know
sure.
that.
A lot of the big guys are out there.
Yeah, Orange County and Dallas have kind of hot spots.
Cool, guys. Well,
Yeah.
let's give our final thoughts. Brian, thank you for joining us and
Thanks
giving
for
us your
having me.
thoughts on sales
Pleasure.
and the mortgage market. And let's wrap it up with just some final thoughts. Nate, anything from you?
Yeah, my final thought, my takeaway from what we talked with Brian about is being dynamic on the phone and just building relationships on the phone and doing it fast. There's value in making sure that you're present to be able to do that. All too often when you get on the phone, you have a call after call after call.
Yeah.
You kind of get in robot mode. But if you stop and pay attention to where you are in that moment and make every moment count on the phone, you can have some pretty dynamic conversations. That's kind of like a reminder for myself too. Be present during a sales opportunity or a podcast or whatever it is. Be present and bring your A game, and you'll be better off for it.
Yeah, for me, I think a couple things that stuck out to me. One, being coachable and humble, I think is so important. If you're coachable and you're humble, when you make mistakes, you'll take ownership over those mistakes and you'll look to improve. You'd much rather have someone inexperienced and humble than someone who's experienced and entitled. And I think that is probably true in a lot of things, not just sales. And then the second thing is just being willing to pay your dues, like put the work in, hit the phone, face rejection, be willing to put yourself out there. And you're going to remember and learn more from the things you didn't do well than the things that you do perfectly. That's how you learn.
Yeah, I think, it's been great having you here, Brian, because we always talk about consumer direct marketing, and it's having your perspective from the sales side, I think has been awesome. It's been something we wanted to do for a while. And so thanks for being here with us and just chatting it up. And I think, there's definitely so much that goes into having a successful sales operation when you're spending as much as the clients that we work with and your company does on marketing and lead generation, getting that phone to ring. When you get that phone to ring, you gotta turn it into
make the most of it.
Yeah, you got to make the most of it, and you want to hit that conversion rate that you expect. And I think a lot of the feedback and ideas you had and discussed, I think, are so vital. And so, just thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure.
Yeah. Well, you've been watching the Juice Consumer Direct podcast with Nate Clegg, Jake Thorpe, Carson Barbinger, and Brian, of course, our good guest, Brian. We're thankful for you to be here. So
Thank you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any questions, comments, leave them below.
2025, let's go.
Big year.
Bandon Dunes.
Bandon Dunes. Let's go to Bandon Dunes.